The sun-reddened Dustbriar, a town built on sweat and sin deep in the heart of the 19th century West. Dust clung to everything, to boots, to dreams, to the curve of a woman's hips as she leaned against the scarred porch of the saloon. Eliza May Carter stood there, her shadow long and hard, her dress hugging her curvaceous figure like a lover's promise. Her breath caught as the coral gate rattled a sharp sound that cut through the twilight. Inside, a jet-black horse, thunderstrike reared hooves slashing the air, eyes wild as a storm no man could tame. 30 cowboys, hardened by rope and pride, had tried. 30 had failed their bodies, bruised their pride, shattered. The whole town watched, yearning for another downfall, their whispers thick with contempt and bourbon. Eliza's fingers tightened on the railing, the wood biting into her flesh. She felt the weight of their gazes, not on the horse but on her. Her ample curves made their little minds whisper, whispering like the desert wind. Fat Eliza, they taunted, all about baking and daydreaming. Yet her eyes locked on Thunderstrike, its muscles rippling like liquid night, and something stirred deep in her chest, a beat of recognition, a shared defiance. She stepped forward, her skirts brushing her thighs, each movement purposeful, drawing the breath of the crowd. One of the men sneered, rough and cruel, but her gaze did not waver. She was not here for them. She was here for the monster no one understood, the one they had beaten into madness. As she approached the stable, a bead of sweat slid down the hollow of her throat, catching the last light like a forbidden gem. The horse neighed, its breath hot and heavy, and the air between them was fiery, dangerous, intimate. She is no rider, they said. She is no hero. But now, as the town held its breath, and Thunderstrike's eyes met hers, Eliza felt the edge of something vast, something wild. What happens when a woman no one trusts walks into a fight no man can win? The stable gates clanged shut behind Eliza May Carter, trapping her in Thunderstrike's fury. The horse pawed the ground, kicking up clouds of dust that clung to her blue dress, highlighting the curve of her hips as she stood firm, unflinching. The laughter of the crowd died away into a tense silence, their eyes sharp with suspicion, some with a cruel glee. Amos Pritchard, a giant of a man with a black eye and bloody sleeves, spat on the ground. "That damn beast has a devil in him," he growled, his voice rough as gravel. Behind him, a line of defeated cowboys, hobbling, shoulders slumped or hatless, stood like ghosts of their own pride. Thunderstrike reared again, its whinny ripping through the dust. Briar, a sound that made children hug their mothers and old men grip their sticks tighter. Eliza did not flinch, her heart pounding, not from fear, but from a memory that burned like a burn. She was 10 years old, her boots too tight, her feet bleeding when she snuck into Holloway's stable to feed the gentle gelding Jasper. His soft muzzle brushed her palm, the first non-judgmental touch of her growing body. "You're good with animals," Eliza, her father, had said, his voice warm from the porch. But the world was not warm. By 14, her body had grown full, her arms strong from kneading dough, her thighs strong enough to carry her through any storm. The boys looked at her not with kindness, but with sneers, their whispers cutting deeper than any spur. "Donut Eliza," they taunted, "too heavy to ride, too soft for this town." She swallowed it all, letting it smolder in silence, her fire buried under years of neglect. Now in the stable that fire burned. Thunderstrike's eyes were bone white, locked on hers, and she saw it, fear not anger, and beating beneath its black fur. The whip cracked again, a stable hand's arm slashing at the air. Blood sprayed from the horse's bit, foaming around its mouth. "Stop," Eliza said, her voice low but sharp enough to cut through the taunts. Whitman scoffed. "This is not your kitchen, lady. That horse is cursed." She stepped closer, her boots crunching the ground, her shadow stretching past the stall post, where Thunderstrike was carved in jagged letters. The crowd stirred, a mix of cheers and whispers. "Fat Eliza's going to try," someone teased. "She'll crush the beast with her weight." Laughter erupted, but Eliza's eyes did not waver. She dropped the sack of oats she was holding, the grains spilling like secrets at her feet. When she bent to place it, her skirts tightened the curve of her waist, catching the fading light, a fleeting moment that silenced a few of the men who had been sneering, their eyes lingering too long. "It's not cursed," she said louder, her voice steady as stone. "It's scared." Something in her voice, calm, unflinching, made even Sheriff Brambleton pause, his hand hovering over the gate lock. Amos turned his battered face away. "Fuck you, want to try it, go ahead." The crowd stirred, coins clinking as bets were placed. Eliza nodded slowly and deliberately. The gates creaked open and she stepped through. Thunderstrike roared, its massive body, shifting muscles coiled like a storm ready to erupt. Eliza stood still, her presence heavy, steady like a tree that had weathered too many storms to fall now. She didn't raise a hand, didn't call out. She just waited, her breathing slow, her eyes soft but penetrating. The horse lowered its head an inch, its nostrils flaring. She reached into her apron and pulled out a slice of apple, the juice glistening on her fingers. "Your choice," she whispered, her voice a warm thread in the chill air. The crowd held its breath, jeers stuck in their throats. Thunderstrike stepped closer, its hooves drawing slow arcs in the dust. Eliza's heart pounded, not from the danger but from the possibility that this monster like herself might simply be waiting for someone to listen. The dust of the stables settled, and Thunderstrike's breath warmed Eliza May Carter's hand as he ate the apple, his lips brushing her palm with a gentleness that was like confession. The silence of the crowd was thick, broken only by the gasp of a child and the creak of a fence under the weight of an old man. Eliza stood, her full body a quiet anchor in the chaos, her skirts catching, the wind accentuating the strength of her thighs. The moment hung fragile, electric, like the pause before a lightning strike. She stroked the bridge of Thunderstrike's nose, her fingers slow, deliberate, as if unraveling a secret no one else dared touch. "You are not a demon," she murmured, her voice deep, intimate, reserved for him. "You are a mirror," a sharp voice cut in. "Do it again." Clayton Voss, with his shiny boots and gold ring, swaggered against the fence, his smirk like a knife aimed at her heart. "Calmness is one thing, Miss Carter, but that means nothing. Ride her up Ridge Trail." The crowd stirred, whispers spreading like wind through dry grass. Ridge Trail, a rugged trail carved into the edge of a canyon, where one wrong step meant a tumble to the jagged rocks below. "She'll fall," someone whispered. "No room for a horse that big," another muttered. Clayton's eyes flashed with defiance. "Unless you're scared." Eliza's jaw clenched, not at his words, but at the memory they brought up. She was 15, standing at the dust briar, her clean shirt starched with hope, her braids knotted with pride. The instructor's voice was still bitter. "Ever see a pig run around a barrel?" The boy's laughter had driven her home, her boots heavy with shame. She never spoke of it. She had buried that day, but it lived in her bones, fueling the fire that kept her gentle, kept her silent until now. She met Clayton's gaze, her eyes steady, determined. "I will ride." The crowd parted as she moved toward the saddle, handed to her by a silent stableman. When she bent to check the leather straps, her skirts stretched tight, the curve of her lower back drawing a quick glance from a cowboy who quickly turned away, cheeks flushed. The saddle was old, scarred from failed rides, but her hands moved with quiet certainty, adjusting the straps, testing the stirrups. Thunderstrike stood still, his massive chest heaving as if he felt the weight of her choice. She slid a foot into the stirrup, hoisting herself up. A gasp ran through the crowd, not because she had mounted, but because Thunderstrike had not resisted. He stood still, accepting her weight as if it were his own. The gate, Eliza called, her voice clear through the night. Sheriff Brambleton hesitated, then nodded. The gate opened and Dustbriar followed on horseback with his cart in his breathless suspicion. The road to the ridge was winding and narrow, cacti on either side like silent sentinels. The cliff below was a grim promise of destruction. Eliza leaned forward, her hands light on the reins, giving Thunderstrike space to feel the path. "Take it easy, boy," she whispered, her warm breath brushing across his mane. The horse bellowed, its hooves steady on the gravel, each step a conversation between them. Behind the crowd kept a careful distance. Clayton's jaw was clenched, his fists tucked into his pockets. No one spoke. The wind picked up, pulling at Eliza's braids, dusting her cheeks. A rock slid beneath Thunderstrike's hoof, tumbling into the ravine below. Someone gasped, but Eliza did not flinch. She felt the danger of the path, felt the eyes on her back, but her focus was only on the horse, on the rhythm of its steps, on the trust they were building. At a sharp turn, a hawk cut through the wind overhead, its shadow hovering over them. She glanced up, a faint smile touching her lips. As a girl, she had dreamed of wings, not to run away, but to soar above the voices that tried to trap her. The trail narrowed further, the edge of the canyon, inches from Thunderstrike's hooves. Eliza's heart pounded, but her hands were steady, her body swaying to the rhythm of the horse. She wasn't just riding, she was listening, feeling the pulse of a creature that, like her, had been misunderstood, mistreated, forced to fight a world that never asked why. The summit loomed a broad ledge beneath a sky ablaze with orange. They were almost there, and the dust briar below them looked small, the stables and feed sheds mere specks in the vastness. Eliza's breath caught not from fear, but from the weight of what was changing inside her. A fire no longer buried a power, no longer silent. Dust, Briar Ridge opened up before Eliza May Carter, a wide ledge where the world dropped into a valley golded by the fading sun. Thunderstrike stopped its massive body steady, its breathing a slow rhythm that matched hers. Eliza sat upright, her hands loose on the reins, her dress hugging the curve of her shoulders, damp with sweat running down her neck. The wind pulled at her braids wild and free, as if it knew she was no longer bound by the petty judgments of the town. Below the dust, Briar was a speck of roofs and smoke, its people mere shadows as she ascended. She closed her eyes, letting the moment sink in. I was never too much. She whispered the words to herself, to the girl who had walked home from the rodeo with tears that had never fallen. They were just too small. Thunderstrike shifted its mane, catching the light like polished obsidian. Eliza leaned forward, her fingers brushing its neck, a touch so soft it sounded like an oath. The descent began, each step purposeful, the jagged edges of the path still a whisper of death, but the burden she had carried, the shame, the silence, the sting of 1,000 taunts, felt lighter now. Not lost, but reshaped into something fierce and unbreakable. The crowd below watched, their faces a blur of shock and disbelief. Clayton Voss stood rigid, his gold ring glinting as he clenched his fists, unable to make the moment something he could own. Even Amos Pritchard, battered and bruised, scratched his head and muttered, "It can't be happening." Eliza and Thunderstrike reached the foot of the mountain, gravel crunching beneath his hooves. She dismounted, her boots planted firmly on the ground, her body moving with a grace that silenced the last of the jeers. When she loosened the saddle, letting him slide to the ground, the crowd prepared for Thunderstrike to flee. He did not. He stepped closer, nuzzling his muzzle into her shoulder, a gesture so tender it was a secret shared among outcasts. Eliza's hand lingered on its side, her fingers tracing the scars of whips and spurs. The townspeople watched not as spectators of a hoax, but as witnesses to something sacred, something they could not quite grasp. Mrs. Lawton, who had passed Eliza at the church bread tables, stepped forward, the handkerchief trembling in her hand. "How beautiful, Miss Carter," she said, her voice trembling. Eliza took the handkerchief, her smile warm but cautious. "Thank you." A boy, no older than 12, his hat too big for his head, crept closer. "I want to ride like that someday," he said, eyes wide. Eliza knelt down slightly, her skirts trailing in the dust, the curve of her hips attracting a quick glance from a passing cowboy who quickly turned away. "Do you have hands?" she asked. The boy nodded proudly, raising his hands. "Then I've started," she said, her voice steady, bringing a bright smile to his face. Sheriff Brambleton approached, his hat lowered. "It takes courage to go that way," he said, "more than that, to do it without anger." Eliza met his gaze, her eyes clear. "I don't ride to prove anything. I ride to tell him he doesn't have to fight anymore." The sheriff nodded slowly, as if he were piecing together a truth he hadn't seen before. He waved his hat and walked away, leaving a different silence, soft rather than cold. Not everyone spoke. Some just stared, their walls of derision crumbling. Clayton Voss crossed the street as Eliza passed later that day, his silence louder than his derision. The town changed, not in grand gestures, but in small human ways. Doors were held open, nods replaced whispers, eyes met hers without flinching. Eliza returned to the feed store, wiping flour on her apron, her movements steady, unhurried. When she lifted a sack of grain, her arms tensed, the strength in them, drawing a silent glance from a stable hand who stammered a thank you when she handed him a loaf of bread. The moment passed, but it lingered, a gleam of respect where there had been contempt. At night, the children gathered at the stables, not to taunt, but to watch. Thunderstrike stood near the fence, his head bowed, his tail flicking gently. Eliza brushed his fur, her hands moving with the same care she had reserved for wounded rabbits and scarred mares. The horse leaned into her touch, his calm mirroring her own. Someone had carved a sign, "Tamed with kindness," and hung it over the stable gate. No one claimed it, and Eliza did not care who did it. The gesture was enough. That night she sat on the fence, her father's diary open in her lap. Its leather cover was as cracked as the ground beneath her feet. She wrote her pencil, scratching lightly. Today I wrote a mirror. It did not break, it bowed and showed me strength and stability. The stars twinkled overhead, lanterns flickered across Dustbriar, and Thunderstrike rested nearby, its presence a silent promise. Eliza's heart, once heavy with the feeling of being forgotten, was now filled not with victory, but with truth. She was no longer the girl who had swallowed her shame to keep the peace. She was the woman who had listened, who had ridden, who had changed the meaning of strength. Spring swept into the Dustbriar with gentle breezes and blooming cottonwoods, softening the hard edges of a town once defined by harshness and contempt. Eliza May Carter sat cross-legged on the sun-warmed grass near the stables. Her skirts gathered beneath her, a box of charcoal pencils open in her lap. A group of children surrounded her, their small hands smeared with black as they sketched the shape of Thunderstrike, its arched neck, its steady eyes. Eliza guided them, her voice gentle but firm. Press lightly for shadow, hard for strength. She set her fingers brushing lightly over one girl's drawing, steadying her hand. The girl frowned, her sketch uneven. "What if I mess it up?" she asked. Eliza's smile was a quiet flame. "Then it's mine, one of a kind." Her eyes lit up and Thunderstrike snorted softly as if in agreement, his mane catching the wind like a peace banner. The stable gate, once cracked by his rage, now bore a new sign, the Boone Circle, the place of taming listening. No announcement, no parade, it just appeared, a silent testament to a moment that had reshaped Dustbriar's heart. Eliza's wound, the shame of a girl taunted for her body, her silence, her softness has not gone away, but it is no longer a cage. Riding Thunderstrike into the ridge, she has not only tamed a horse, she has reclaimed herself, pieced together a life that has been neglected. The town sees her now not as a spectacle, but as a force, kind, steadfast whole. One Saturday, Mrs. Loudon's daughters approached the elder one trembling, as she asked, "Miss Carter, would you teach us to ride?" Eliza nodded, saddling Thunderstrike with hands that knew pain and patience in equal measure. As she guided the younger girl in a slow circle, the child's laughter rang out as clear as a bell, and Eliza's chest ached with a gumma she had forgotten she could feel. That night on the porch, she sipped cold tea, her father's diary open to his last words. "The things worth writing about are the things that go with you, not under you." She traced the ink, her fingertips lingering, then closed the book. Its weight was a comfort, not a burden. At dawn, Eliza walked to the edge of the ridge path, her boots silent on the ground. Thunderstrike waited under the orange sky, older now. Wiser, his eyes holding a story only the two of them shared. She pressed her forehead to his, her breath mingling with his. "I never wanted to break you," she whispered. "Just let you breathe." He exhaled deep and slow and turned away, his hooves fading into the misty horizon. Eliza stood alone, the wind pulling at her braids, her footprints light as if she had learned to walk without apology. Before her the hills stretched wide, endless, a canvas of possibilities. Behind her the Dustbriar hummed with life, softer now changed.